everyone. I'm very excited to be here with Warren Brown. Warren is the SVP of product at Settle. So if you don't know, Settle is a unified platform designed for CPG brands to support procurement, inventory, AP, and financing all in one place. So kind of think one-stop shop. Early January, and many brands and their accountants are in the throes of closing out their books for 2024. So, we wanted to do this episode and kind of talk about what's hard for e-com teams and their accountants to close their books, and what are some of the best practices we're seeing. How to close faster, how to be more efficient, more accurate. So, closing your books, closing your books timely is crucial for an e-com, a CPG brand for several reasons. Accurate financial reporting, regulatory and third-party compliance, cash flow management, investor confidence, and really just helping founders strategically plan their business and their growth, right? So Warren, knowing you have over 20 years of experience in product leadership, you've helped brands develop procurement and payment solutions. Can you share a little bit more about your story and sort of what brought you to Settle today?
Yeah, well, Lonnie, it's great to be here. Happy New Year. Excited to be here and talking about this. It's a topic that's close to my heart, and I know is on a lot of minds of a lot of accountants and a lot of e-commerce brands out there. But yeah, my journey, I think it really started out. Second job out of college I started out building micro lending products for entrepreneurs in Africa and Latin America. And so it was really cool flying all over the world and sitting down with these, the woman running the little hair salon in the suburbs of Santo Domingo, or in the barrios of Santo Domingo, and working with the orange seller in the markets of San Salvador, El Salvador, and figuring out how do you build a lending product to help them grow their business. And it was kind of my first, it was a couple of big lessons, right? It was my first interaction with the idea of product, like being a person who goes out, listens to customers and understands their business and what they need, and then goes back and works with a team to try and create a solution and bring it back to them. Right. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. Like, this is really fun. We had focus groups where we had 30 people sitting around in a circle in the middle of a market talking about, what they needed for a loan. It's just fun, right? But, also learned, just how much of an impact access to capital can have, especially on small businesses. It's like you talk to someone, they're like, if I just had $200 worth of capital in that context, right, it could change my business. And you're like, wow, this is cool. So that stayed with me kind of throughout the career. And fast forward a little bit, I spent some time at Timberland in their apparel footwear supply chain world. And so that was kind of my first exposure to, the spreadsheet hell, where you've got sales has got their go-to-market spreadsheet, supply chains has got their, it's got their supply spreadsheets, finance has got their budget spreadsheets, and none of them match. And there's this craziness of trying to bring them all together. And so I think that's kind of stayed with me too, of like that, that exists at that time. That was a $2 billion business. Right. And we see it every day in our $1 million to $150 million businesses. Fast forward even further, I ran fintech banking for a local bank. And that really kind of got me into the controller, the accountant, the bookkeeper's room at a ton of SMBs, and just listening to like, how do they make payments? How do they do AP? How do they do AR? And really saw for the first time, small businesses starting to adopt a piece of software to pull all that together. And that's kind of brought me, and then over a bunch of years, I've worked with about 7 different startups, and now at Settle. And what I love about it is, one, we get to work with this great group of hustling entrepreneurs. So it's like the coolest customer base you could ever work with as a product leader is a bunch of like hustling entrepreneurs who are trying to build their business, because they're just dynamic, exciting, energizing. Like, I get excited just listening to their stories, right?
And you get to be a customer and enjoy the brands too.
That's right. Oh, I mean, like I'm wearing one of our brands right now, and actually, I've switched my coffee routine to everyday dose because I love what they do and I love the experience of it, right? And so it's a great brand discovery mechanism as well. And I think what I love about what we do at Settle is that for a lot of the founders that we work with and the brands that we work with, their founders aren't experts in supply chain or finance or ops. They got into it because they're passionate about product, they're passionate about their customers, and they're kind of learning the back of the house stuff on the fly. And I love that we Settle like that's all we do. That's what we focus on, right? And so we can kind of help them accelerate their learning curve, take away some of those fears or doubts or concerns about building best in class back office processes, and get them back to focusing on growing the business. So
Right.
just it's a really fun, exciting place to be. I feel like it kind of brings together a lot of my experiences over time in a really cool way.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a ton of experience, and that's what I was going to say. It kind of meshes well with all of your experience, right? You're talking about the payments and finance aspect, the logistics, procurement, and the product, right? So, really interesting.
It's really, I mean, sometimes opportunities in your career come along where they just get to kind of bring everything together, and I just feel like that's where I am at Settle, which is fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's take a deep dive in some of those challenges accounting teams face when it comes to closing their books at year end, specifically inventory-based businesses. From my perspective, we have clients that are trying to close their books, and we ask for their inventory reconciliation, and it takes weeks to get, right, because there's adjustments, there's variances that they have to investigate. It's a big headache, when it comes to inventory tracking evaluation. Just given business owners can deal with just large volumes of inventory, various locations, perishable inventory, if we're talking about food and bev, you have to think about obsolescence. How do you see companies managing this process of tracking inventory? And then what tools are you seeing, finance teams use to reconcile their books at year end? And how long can they live out of spreadsheets? Right?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, well, like I said, I sort of got early exposure to this, even at a $2 billion brand that, spreadsheets were still running the back of the house. But, we see companies that today as big as $50+ million of revenue still running their back office in spreadsheets, right? So it's certainly where, most of the $500,000, $1 million brands are, but we see it going much deeper. But they kind of pay the price for doing so. We had one CFO say, I just want to free up my team's time to focus on actually executing on our strategic projects, our cost reduction projects, our new product development projects, but they're spending all of their time just pulling the data together to know where we are. Like, I want to have something that tells me where I am, so then I can focus my time on making it better. Right. And I think that's the problem with spreadsheets, is they're easy and they're flexible. Like, they're one of the most powerful pieces of software ever built, right? Is you can do just about anything with them if you have the time and energy to make them work right. And when you only have one product and one channel and one D2C website, you can get by. Like, it works, right? But what we find is that is complexity comes, right, as you expand products, as you expand channels, as you expand vendors, on the back end. And if you don't, for brands who wait for the complexity to overwhelm them and then try and fix it, you're kind of dealing with a mess, and you have to sort out the mess before you can put something in place. And so we always kind of encourage folks of, even if you're $500,000 or $1 million in revenue, like, you're still relatively simple business, is, get onto a set of processes, a platform that, that can scale with you, right? That's not going to fall apart as your business becomes more complex, as you grow, right? And I kind of think about it as, every brand and accountant who works with e-commerce, really, when it comes to the back of the house, it all boils down to needing to know two things, right? One is, what's my inventory worth? Like, how much inventory do I have and what's it worth? Because I need to be able to put the asset on my balance sheet, right? And then what's my COGS, right? How much did I sell and what did it cost me to sell that? Because then I need that to figure out gross profit and contribution margin. And you're like, oh, it's just two questions. I mean, this is easy, right? But everybody who's in the space knows that answering those two questions gets, can take teams days and days and weeks,
months even.
months even, right? And as we spend a lot of time with e-commerce accountants, we spend a lot of time with heads of finance, heads of ops in the e-commerce space, and I boil it down to kind of three core challenges or problems, right, that everyone's trying to deal with in order to get to inventory valuation and get to COGS quickly and easily. First one is dispersed data, right? Is okay, in order to answer either of those questions, you need sales data, you need inventory data, and you need cost data. And for a lot of people, those are in three different systems or something. Sales data can itself be in 5 different systems, right? If I'm selling through Amazon, I'm selling through Shopify, I'm selling B2B, and I've got an SPS channel and a fair channel. And so pretty quickly you can just say, in order to have the data that I need to calculate COGS, I need to connect 10 or 20 different systems. And we've talked to, folks who are like, I spend 2 hours a day logging into 5 different warehouse management systems just to pull together and like, what is my on-hand inventory position today? Right. And you're like, man, I don't want that job. And I'm sorry that you have that job. And boy, can we make that better for you? Right. But that comes back to the CFO's point of, if you're doing that, you're not working on making it better. Right. So dispersed data is a big challenge. And then timing gaps is the second big challenge that we see a lot of, which is like when you think about COGS, you need landed costs to get to COGS, right? And landed costs are your unit costs plus all the freight and insurance and duties and everything else. And the challenge people face is the bills for that freight and the duties don't come in for 30, 60, 90 days. And the inventory might have come in between. So now I've got inventory in my books and I have to know how to value it, right? What landed cost to apply. And so that timing gap, we see some people just using the unit cost until the bill comes in, and then that creates a big variance, right? And big variances, investors hate them. It makes it hard to plan. Like there's all kinds of problems. Right? Yeah, I mean, you know this. So then the third issue, you got the dispersed data, you got the timing gaps. The third one is the linking it all together, right? I think the best example of this is, talking to a group of e-commerce accountants, and I said, when you're doing the bank reconciliation, looking at all the transactions from the bank account, when you get that deposit on a PO, right, and it's sitting in the bank reconciliation, the only place it sits is there. Somebody made the payment for it, but it's not linked back to the PO. And so they'll spend 2 weeks trying to find the right person inside the client organization who made that payment, who knows which PO to tie it to. Right. And that's just a simple little thing. If this payment is tied to this PO, it represents 20% of the amount, but it might take 2 weeks of elapsed time and multiple hours of engaged time just to make that linkage. Right. And so like those are kind of when we see those 3 problems again and again and again, you just kind of say, how do we solve those? How do we make those problems go away so that accountants can focus on higher value add activities and brands can focus on growing the business? Right.
And you need technology and automation.
And listen, technology is not a panacea. I'm a technology guy, but I'm also trying to be a realist. But that's really our core mission at Settle. It's like, how do we connect all the data that you need about your business? And we focus only on the e-commerce space because I think to do it right, you have to really know the space, and then close those timing gaps and make it super easy and automated to link everything together. And so it's why we're one of the first in the market to bring together not just the procurement and inventory side, but also the payments and the accounts receivable side. So it's like the finance, the ops, and the inventory together in one place. And we just launched in December. It's what we call our end of month inventory report. And it's because we have all that data together in one place, because we have it automatically linked, we can actually download a report for accounts that says, for every product in every location, here's beginning of month, end of month, here's your COGS, here's your inventory valuation, and it's done for you. Right. And
saving days for accounting teams, for finance teams, and
that's it.
allowing them to focus on the bigger and broader business and operations.
That's it. And it's like, we've sat down with accounting teams and they've got a great process and all kinds of spreadsheets for this, but we just feel like, if we can give them that time back, there's a lot more higher value stuff that everybody wants to do.
And there's only a certain amount of time until those spreadsheets break, right? We see it all the time. Is I always say, if you're a $10 million e-commerce business, you should start probably looking even sooner than that, but you should start looking for automation, so some sort of solution.
Yeah, we argue a little sooner, just because if you get the system in, but before your business is super complex, it's a lot easier to then race through the complexity.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
We're super excited, actually, coming up here in February. Another company in the space that that also focuses on kind of solving the same problem in a different area is a company called A2X. I think a lot of accountants know them and a lot of brands know them because they simplify the revenue reconciliation side of things,
right,
for e-commerce brands. And so we're on the cusp of launching an integration where brands who build their back of house on Settle can get automated calculation of their landed costs, and we automatically feed those over to A2X, and then A2X pushes COGS as well as revenue into their QBO on a daily basis. So it's like, how do we keep finding ways to make it faster, easier, and more accurate to get the stuff that you need to run your operations, but then ultimately to get the data that you need into the accounting software.
Right. It also makes it easier as a company scaling and growing. If there's turnover in the accounting department and you're living out of spreadsheets, and you only have that one person that knows how to actually operate the spreadsheet, right? And that person's now gone. Now you have to, reinvent the wheel, right?
I feel a little bit badly, but not too badly for the VLOOKUP experts who are masters of it and have created something that works until it doesn't. We are asking those folks to maybe apply their skills elsewhere, but I think
hot commodity, yeah.
It's huge. It's crazy. I actually learned there is a World Excel Championships that is hosted every year.
Oh, wow! So, I did not know that.
There's a place for folks who have those skills to put them on display.
I have some folks on my team that might be interested in that. So
all right, they should just check it out. It's like they was in Vegas, the whole thing.
In Vegas, look at that. Okay. That's all great, Warren. So just ducktailing off of this conversation right around inventory. Let's talk about some best practices around accurate reporting COGS and profit margins. So accrual-based accounting is obviously super important for inventory-based businesses. You want to match your costs with your revenue as you're generating sales, right? And COGS for an e-com brand can be difficult to estimate. We've kind of talked about those direct and also indirect components and costs that go into that. Tooling or other indirect costs, insurance, freight, those types of things. So landed costs. So what are brands doing to properly account for landed costs, right? Those estimations. And then just tracking and monitoring any variances. What kind of automation are you helping out with to just streamline that process?
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time kind of looking at what people were doing and trying to understand, what problems they run into. And as I mentioned earlier, that timing gap was one of the big problems, right? Is I don't know what my actual freight costs are going to be maybe for 90 days after the order ships. And so what we see as best practice is really to start tracking landed costs right from the moment of placing the PO or initiating the inventory transfer, right? Because landed costs are not just on the POs; they're also moving inventory from one place to another. And so what we've built into Settle is, because usually brands have a pretty good idea of what their freight costs are going to be, what their insurance or duties or those other additional expenses, is we've built into Settle right on the PO, right on the inventory transfer, right on the work order, the ability to add an estimated additional expense for each of those. And that feeds right in, that creates a landed cost for those items right out the gate. right? And that at least means that if you're closing your books and the shipping and the freight bill hasn't come in, you're now closing your books using the estimate, which we know is going to be more accurate than a zero, right? Um, and then because we're not just the procurement inventory system, but because we're the payment system as well, we, as the bill comes in, we make it like dead easy to then link that bill back to that estimate, automatically update the landed cost. If you estimated $5,000 and it was actually 7,500, we then respread the 7,500 across the PO, automatically recalculate the landed cost. And if that happens inside the month, then your end of month inventory report now uses the actuals.
Right.
If it happens after you've closed a month, we're about to launch what we call our adjustment report, which basically takes every event that happens after a month close that might have changed units or dollars in prior months, and gives you a line by line reconciliation of, okay, this landed cost went from $5 to $6. That means that COGS needs to change in December and November in the following way.
Right.
And up to the accountant then to say, do I go back and reopen those months, or do I take it as an adjustment, now in January, right?
Right. At least it gives them that data in somewhat real time to make that decision.
That's the goal. That's right. is what we heard from a lot of accountants is their criteria for when do I take it in the prior month or when do I take it now,
right,
is based on 6 different factors that we could never kind of automate. And so it's like, let me give you the visibility quickly, easily, and accurately. And then, you're going to do your job and do it well, but right, just spend less time doing it.
Right. So yeah, when we're thinking about like monthly annual closing process, what third party systems are, or reporting, or our finance teams dealing with, right? Just thinking about the end-to-end supply chain, there can be so many layers just connecting, the sales channel to the warehouse, management to accounting. And if you're operating in more than one 3PL, more than one warehouse, you'll need integrations with each warehouse management system, each sales channel, right? And then having that ability to reconcile to accounting data. So I guess what advice would you give to accounting teams to better manage that process? And what is the right time, to bring in automation versus, more headcount on your finance team? It sounds like you're certainly promoting just earlier is better and being proactive.
Yeah. I think that is, that's certainly our, I think there is a too early, I think if you're still kind of figuring out product market fit and that sort of thing, then focus on solving those problems and don't worry too much about system. But if you're starting to kind of bend up that scaling curve, which we see happening at $500,000 of revenue or $1 million of revenue, getting a platform in place that will allow you to expand channels, allow you to expand SKUs, allow you to expand vendors very quickly and easily. It's just like, why wouldn't you do it early and then and then not stumble when you're right in the middle of scaling, right? Right. And so in terms of like, what do we see people doing? The typical process, right, is, someone at the brand or someone in the accounting firm, log into system A, which is the WMS for the West Coast warehouse, download the data. Log into system B, which is the WMS for the East Coast warehouse, download the data. Log into system C, which is Amazon for sales data. Download the data, rinse, wash, repeat, right, can be 10 or 20 different systems. Drop them all into different tabs on a spreadsheet, and then you have to do the first thing of like, well, Amazon calls this, this Shacket, one thing, and WMS-A calls it another thing, and WMS-B calls it another thing, and Shopify calls it another thing. So you got to do a V, that's where the VLOOKUP comes in. And so we see people just spending a lot of time of just syncing the data, right? And they'll automate it, but then, they'll add a bundle in Shopify, and that does, and that doesn't flow across all the systems. So now they got to change their spreadsheet. And so all that gets you to how many units do I have? How many units did I sell? Right. But that doesn't get you to costs. Right. And so now I usually have another separate system like a bill.com or whatever else, where all my payment and my bank reconciliation, where all my payments have happened. So now I have to take all those payments and manually link them back to the POs and the work orders and the inventory transfers, in order to get to costs. And I think I just look at that and I say, it's a classic thing in business systems is you build these siloed systems to be really good at one thing, but then the accountant or the brand has to be the human glue that stitches them together.
Right.
And I think in the world that we're at, in the state of technology that we're at, I think the next generation platforms, and I think Settle is one of these, is to make that human glue job go away. You don't want siloed systems. You want one system that understands all of those different parts and knows that this SKU is the same across all of these different data sources, and brings in the costs and brings in the units all together in one place. And our mission is like, how do we help accounting teams focus on the higher value add activities, not on data aggregation, but on like, what does the data mean and what should your client do to make their business better?
Right.
Everybody wants to have that conversation, right? But you have to have the time to know the data, our mission from an accountant perspective is like, how do we actually help make accountants' client engagements more profitable, right? If we're taking the labor that's hard to charge for out of the system, that means you're able to either charge less and get more clients, or make more money on your engagements, right? And that's important.
Is there when you think about the warehouses, is there consistency in the technology they use to sort of track inventory, perpetual inventory? Is it a barcode system, RFID? What do you typically see, and how does that integrate with that?
That's been a really interesting learning for me, as getting into this space is. So first of all, the number of warehouse management software systems that are out there, we're integrated to, it's now over 60. And we still, just this week we had another customer come in saying, "Hey, we're using this one," and we're like, "Oh, we're not integrated, but we're starting the integration and we'll add it." Right. So a lot of diversity in software, and I think for understandable reasons. If you're, as you said, if you're food and bev and you're a refrigerated product, obviously you need a different set of warehouses than if you're an apparel company. And so the data that you need about your products and the details of running that warehouse are different. So I guess it makes sense that there's so many different software platforms out there, but as a 5-person brand trying not to be a 20-person brand because I want to be profitable, having people stitching together all those different systems doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, let's talk horror stories, right? We talked about the importance of closing the books by January 15th, right? Closing timely, quick reporting so we can make proper decisions and run the business. What is truly the importance of accounting here, right? Because founders want to run the business, they want to grow the business, and in our experience, we have clients that don't close the books for a few months, right? And it creates challenges. But to convince a founder that closing the books timely is important could be challenging as well. So what is your take on that, and what kind of horror stories have you run into with your clients?
And I get it, right? Like I said, one of the things I love about being in this space is working with hustling entrepreneurial founders, right? And your job as a founder is to focus on the next most important thing and be laser focused on it. And it sometimes feels like having clean income statements and balance sheets and cash flow statements in my accounting software isn't the next most important thing. It's like, I get it. But stuff that we see, like where it breaks down, right, is, listen, you're growing and you're not worried about the accounting, and then you need to raise equity, right? And so you're going out. We talked to a bunch of folks of, hey, I'm going out to talk to investors for the first time. And so if it takes you, 3 months to clean up your books, from the moment you wanted to go out and raise equity, well, that's 3 months of burn you just lived through. That's not great. But then even when you do get there, what your accountant has almost certainly had to do is take a bunch of variances and a bunch of adjustments in order to get things in line. And so now investor, they listen to your pitch, they love the product, they love the, and they love the space that you're in. They think you're clearly passionate and knowledgeable, and they open up your income statement, and they see from a cost standpoint, massive swings in COGS in particular because of these adjustments. And that looks to me as an investor like a business that's out of control. Right. And it's probably not true, right? Like it's actually, the business is probably much more in control than it appears on their income statement. But if an investor is seeing massive swings in inventory value and in COGS because of adjustments, that you lose trust. And I think, and trust is one of those, it's really hard to build and really easy to lose. And so my counsel is always, listen, why does accounting matter from an investor standpoint? It's a massive vehicle for building trust, right? And if you have, even if your margins aren't where you ultimately want them to be, if they're consistent and they can see a clear trend, now you're at least focusing on, okay, well, what are you going to do about that, right? As opposed to explain to me the craziness that's going on here.
Right. Yeah, I think we've seen this real life example with clients, right, where fundraising is halted or delayed or significantly impacted because their books weren't ready. And right. You go through, let's say, a first year audit, or you go through a diligence process to raise capital, you get a request for 100 line items of information, and inventory's not ready, right? And you need a few weeks or whatever it is. I think about it like Shark Tank, right? Half of those deals don't go through because you pitch your product, you say you have 10 million in sales, a couple million in inventory, then they look at the books, and you missed a decimal here, and you actually have only 500,000 inventory, right? And deals fall through because of it, and it's certainly that trust aspect is key.
No, I think that's right. And I think the other thing we see is at the end of the day, scaling an e-com business is about optimization, right? It's about building a process and then seeing how it's working, and then how do I tweak it? And there's a lot of tools and talk out there on the optimization on the revenue side, like on the marketing and revenue side of how do I optimize for higher conversion rates. But optimization is real on the supply chain back of house side too, right? But figuring out where to focus your efforts on cost optimization, if you don't have clean data and so you don't know what your true landed costs are, which ones are too high, and which products are costing you too much in which channels, then how do you know where to start? And so again, if the business is about consistently iterating and optimizing to make it better and better, if you don't have a clean data to start with, or it takes you a month to figure out what your data was last month, then you're not spending that time on the stuff that you want to. And so it's like, why focus on getting it right the first time, so that you can then spend much more of your time iterating on the improvements, changing the packaging a little bit because you see that packaging cost is trending upwards, or finding a new freight vendor that can lower your freight costs, or whatever it might be. You'd rather be your team. It's a small team, right? You only have so many hours in a day, and can you spend your time on how could we make this better, not on where are we?
Right. Yeah. Warren, we covered a ton today, and hopefully, if you're an e-com CPG business and living out of spreadsheets, just know that there are solutions out there, right? And sometimes you just have to pause and take a look at some of those variances and say, yeah, this is the end with that. We need a better solution, right? But yeah, Warren, really appreciate the time today. I think we certainly learned a lot about how to close our books by January 15th. We'll see if we could actually do that for some of our clients. But
that's our goal. That's our goal.
Yeah, Warren. And then for listeners, what's the best way to reach out to you, to reach out to Settle, to talk anything, e-commerce or learn more?
Yeah, listen, certainly best way to find us is settle.com. online. You can reach out to me, on LinkedIn. Email is warren@settle.co. Would love talking all things e-commerce and e-commerce accounting with folks. And listen, the great thing about my job in the product role is just listening to what's working and what's not working today, and then because that inspires us to come up with ways to make it better. And so, if you're curious about what we're doing and want to learn more, or if you're, boy, I've got this problem and I wish somebody would solve it, I would love those conversations.
Awesome. Yeah, really appreciate it, Warren. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Lonnie. Great chatting with you.